It's my pleasure to introduce to you Dr. Adewale Troutman, who identifies himself through his commitment to social justice, human rights, community activism, health equity, and national and global health. His life's work has been a testimony to this fact. Dr. Troutman has over 40 years of dedication through action to the principles of universal freedoms and the elimination of racism, injustice, and oppression. His unique educational background has been a major factor to this quest. Dr. Troutman has an MD from New Jersey Medical School, a master's in public health from Columbia University, a master's in Black Studies from the State University of New York in Albany. As of October 2009, he has board certification from the National Board of Public Health Examiners. He is a residency-trained family physician graduating from residency at the Medical University of South Carolina. His career has included clinical emergency medicine, hospital administration, academic and public health practice. He served as the Associate Professor in the University of Louisville School of Public Health and Information Sciences while directing the Metro Louisville Department of Public Health and Wellness. Dr. Troutman has had multiple publications, including What If We Were Equal, co-authored with former Surgeon General and Assistant Secretary of Health, Dr. David Satcher. His awards and recognitions include the Metastar Physician of the Year Award, the St. Stephen's Community Man of the Year Award, the Oppenheimer Award for Social Justice, the Power to End Stroke Award, and numerous others. So he's got a lot of background here. Dr. Troutman was recently elected President-elect of the American Public Health Association and is a nationally known speaker and is an accomplished, this is something I didn't know, he is an accomplished African percussionist, a scuba diver, a published poet, and a writer. And I kind of messed with him a little bit ago because I first met him about 3 years ago at the Arkansas Public Health Association meeting. And he was just wonderful. He can weave a story. So I told him that I was going to say something, give a little jab here and there. But he is wonderful. You guys will enjoy him so much and will leave here with some information that you can take home with you. So it is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Adewale Troutman.
I am excited to be back in this wonderful state. Second time in 2 weeks, third time in 2 years. Someone just said to me, why don't you just stay here for the last week rather than going home? I want to make sure I give a shout out to our hosts who've been so wonderful to us. Dr. Evans Lee and Ruthie Johnson in particular, who's been on the phone for multiple occasions to get to set this up. And Catherine Donald, who picked us up at the airport, and I said it gives a new meaning to the word "your mama," because that's what we went to eat. I was saying the other day, you know, when I was a teenager growing up, if you said "your mama," you were ready to fight. So the introduction is wonderful. I thought that there'd probably be a need to expand the introduction a bit and tell you a little bit about me so we know where we're coming from. Oh, that's better. Thank you. Yeah, this is my family. I will not divulge the secret as to which one is me. But I was born and raised in the South Bronx in a poor environment. Living with rats and roaches, and in those days, no elevators, no air conditioning, sleeping on the roof. One of my brothers subsequently passed. The other one is still alive, and this is my mother, who is now 95 years old. I'll tell her you said that. She still lives in the Bronx in a place called Co-op City, and recently had some challenges with her health. She passed out once or twice, and we thought maybe it was now time for her to agree to be in an assisted living facility. So we talked it out with my mother, and she agreed, says, yeah, okay, I think it's time. We started looking around for a place. And a couple of weeks later, she called, or I called her, and she said, you know what? I don't think I need to go into an assisted living facility anymore because Preston is now coming to the house 3, 4, 5 times a week, and he's doing the cooking, he's doing the cleaning, so I don't think I need assisted living. So I said, okay, well, I'll tell you what, and I figured I'd mess with her. I said, you tell Preston, if he doesn't take care of you, I'm coming to the Bronx, I'm gonna kick his behind. This is 7:30 in the morning on a Saturday. And she says to me, oh, you can tell him yourself. So my grandmother, my mother is 95. She's the original cougar because our boyfriend Preston is 80. Yeah, I said, Ma, that's too much information. I don't know. I don't need to know. So when Denise, who's my life partner and business partner, and I were thinking about the bio, we kind of thought about the things that I was born into, and I mentioned poverty, but certainly that was a period of intense racial tension. I grew up in the 50s and primarily in the 60s and the 70s. Segregation everywhere, no green space in urban environments. That's still the case in many urban environments and so on. My father left when I was 4, and one of the few memories I have of him was that he gave my mother a black eye, and then left, and I never saw him again after that till I was about 11 or 12 years old. So that's kind of the background of my work. But the things that stimulated me to do the work that I do, I'd love to read. I was very much into music, and I got introduced to the writings of some of the heroes of the African American history. Frederick Douglass, Martin Luther King, Harriet Tubman and her story, and many, many others. And that really put me on a path to say that I can do anything. I have enough brains, I have enough intellect, I have enough commitment, and we need to make a difference in the lives of this community in particular. And of course, I think the whole country, but the African American community in particular needs find a way to manifest its strength and its beauty across the country. And that set me on the path that I'm still on, and a recognition of the power of that one person can make a tremendous difference. Some of the people that I thought about in this context are people's names that we know. This is where one person has made a dramatic difference in the world. People like Mother Teresa, Gandhi, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, Steve Jobs. Sometimes we forget about this gentleman who really changed the face of technology in the world. But also, we added this one today because she's such a magnificent individual, Latanisha Wright, and the work that she's done, the power of one person to turn the industry around. You're so welcome. We are connected. We sometimes forget that. And it's not just a theory, it's a molecular fact that we're all connected. Some of the new science, new physics says that there are subatomic particles that react to other people's movement or other particles around the globe. We had SARS, the disease that started someplace in Asia and all of a sudden found its way into North America. We had West Nile virus, which was never been seen in the United States before, was well known in the Nile Valley, now found itself in the United States. We had remember H1N1 a couple of years ago, bird flu, affected the entire globe, and all of the projections about potential millions of lives lost. The economy, the Italian economy takes a dive, the United States economy is hit. So we're all very, very much connected. And political unrest, and there are so many examples of the fact that we're connected, but I particularly like this one from the great leader, Mufasa, who said, in my best James Earl Jones voice, "We are all connected by the great circle of life." So what I'm asking us to do in this presentation is to look at tobacco differently. I just look at it through a lens of equity and health equity and social justice, which I think is a primary issue when it comes to any health issue that primarily affects people of color or people who are lower on the socioeconomic ladder. It's partly a question of framing. How you frame an issue determines your analysis, your resources. It determines who your friends are and who your enemies are. It determines when you, in fact, have reached a conclusion. and have found a way to deal with the issue. Framing becomes critically important when it comes to any health issue, and it's something that we need to take a look at. There are many, many issues of framing that we could discuss to make this point, but only a couple. The first is health versus healthcare. When you ask the average person, what is health? They generally think of hospitals, doctors, clinics, diagnosis, medical management, medications, etc. When we mention health, we're talking about the whole spectrum of all the things that affect the health of populations and communities and individuals. That is, transportation, education, income, jobs, neighborhood, violence, safety. All these things impact the health of a population. So we are looking at a much broader notion of what health is as it relates to tobacco as well. When you think about the notion that the advertising issues that are being mentioned today for tobacco products are most heavily concentrated in poor communities, black communities, Latino communities, poor white communities. You don't see them in middle-income communities around the United States. You see them where poor folk live, where people of color live. That to me is an indication that there's a social injustice going on here when it comes to tobacco advertising and marketing. And that's a part of the notion of looking at this from the standpoint of social justice. Health equity is the term, the movement that's spreading across the United States, which engenders a discussion about human rights. And it says that health equity is a focus on optimal opportunities for all people to achieve a healthy life. And we'll talk more about that in just a minute. We know the work of Martin Luther King. We know he was a brilliant tactician. We know that he was a soldier for justice and human rights and civil rights. But many of us don't recognize that this is his position on health. Of all the injustices in health are the most shocking and inhumane. And I'm sure if he were here today, he'd be talking about the injustice around tobacco production and marketing and the fact that it's clearly an element of race and ethnicity and socioeconomic status. So there are a few definitions that I would like to put out here for us to consider in relationship to the work that we do around tobacco. The first is health itself. This is a definition from the World Health Organization, and it makes it clear that health is much more than just being sick or being well. It says that health is the presence of physical, psychological, social, economic, and spiritual well-being, not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. So even if you have no disease or infirmity, if you're not well in these other areas, you're not considered a healthy person according to WHO. And the second definition really focuses on the fact that we have this thing called mind, body, and spirit, with this triad of existence. And any one of them is out of balance, we're not a healthy individual. The same is true, by the way, for communities. I believe that communities have a mind, a body, and a spirit. And if you look at those things, that you can find areas that they're out of sync and not balanced, and therefore the community itself is not healthy. And just being in that environment makes it more difficult for you to optimize your health status. This is a long definition, and I hesitate sometimes to put it on a slide, but it's very, very important. This is how we define health equity, a term that you will increasingly hear over the next years. The key elements of this is that it focuses on all people. This is all the yellow highlights. Achieving the highest attainable level of health. It entails focused and ongoing societal efforts to address these issues by assuring the conditions for optimal health for all groups. And then it further says, particularly for those who have experienced historical or contemporary injustice or socioeconomic disadvantage. So it puts it clearly in the context of human rights and social justice. Beyond even the discussion of health disparities. Disparities means differences. That's all. So there are disparities that are natural based upon gender and age and other involvement. So as a slightly older than 35-year-old man who happens to be black, is somebody in the audience who's 25-year-old female, she and I have disparities. Differences in our health status because she's 25 female and oops, I almost said it. okay, I'm 67, so we're good. WHO has been a leader in this business for quite some time, and they had a meeting of European ministers recently, and this quote came out: "There can be no hope for the spread of freedom, democracy." This is how serious this is. No spread for freedom, democracy, and human dignity unless we treat health as a basic human right. So that's the foundation of all of this discussion for me and for those of us who are doing this work. Health is a basic human right. It sets the stage for the way we have to address the issue across the country. If it's a human right, how can we sit by while one segment of the population doesn't have equitable access to that human right? In some ways, it's a human rights violation, if you think about it that way. And that has all kinds of implications that we could talk about. Inequities, which is my preference to the word inequities rather than disparities, is key because it talks about there being systemic, avoidable, unfair, and unjust. You could also say unnatural differences and so on and so on. Sustained over time and generations and beyond the control of individuals. So basically, again, it's not letting individuals off the hook. Individual behavior is extremely important. But it's saying that there are societal forces that are at play in what happens to the health of all of us. And we can't ignore those. We have to find a way to address them on a broader level. Justice is about fairness. That's the essence of justice. Now, if anybody has a teenager in this room, you know about fairness. How many got teenagers? How many times a teenager said, that ain't fair? Okay. Moral rightness, fairness, rightness in action or attitude, these are the key elements of justice, and that's, again, relating to the health of our populations. If you take them and elevate them to the broadest level of society, you now have social justice, a term that we hear a lot about, but this is a definition that implies equity, again, and the equal access to societal power, goods, and services. As a matter of fact, the World Health Organization says one of the things we have to do to bring about health equity is change the relationships of power, money, and resources around the world, not just within the United States, but all the countries around the globe. What are rights? Well, they're entitlements. Their claims are entitlements recognized by legal or moral principles, reinforced by legislation and the rules and the force of law. So this is a legal definition for rights. Human rights, higher order, morally based, universal. You have these rights because you're a human being, because you were born into this universe. No other reason is necessary. It may be written down someplace, it may not be written down. It's still a basic human right. And it belongs to all persons equally. And the quote I'd like to remind you of, Declaration of Independence, we hold these truths to be self-evident that all people are created equal and endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, and among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It doesn't say health, but if you talk to a constitutional lawyer, they'll tell you that you can't have life, liberty, and pursue happiness without having health. So it's implied in this Declaration of Independence, and Thomas Jefferson actually wrote about health, just didn't make the document. So we are standing on firm ground that health is a basic human right, and from that all things flow. As a matter of fact, if you look at the World Health Organization's document, their constitution, it's written down there for you. It says the enjoyment of the highest standard of health is one of the fundamental rights of every human being without distinction of race, religion, political belief, economic or social condition. Something, again, you can stand on firm as a rock. This is my good friend Albert. The reason he's in my presentation is because he's paraphrased and he said this very remarkable statement that relates to the work that we do. He said, or at least he's reported to have said, if we continue to do the same thing in the same way and expect a different result, well, you're out of your mind. He didn't quite say it that way. I can add a little flavor there. And in the context of our work, it's like, why do we still have this gap in access to services and access to long life and healthy life and access to not having a community that's bombarded with cigarette smoke and smoking advertisements and alcohol ads and liquor stores and why do we still have this after so many years? And I'm talking about decades and centuries. Because we've been doing things the same way and expecting a different result. That is focusing on the traditional medical model and one-on-one addressing health issues and diseases, injuries, et cetera, but not addressing the bigger, broader issues of transportation, occupation, housing that I mentioned before, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. So he would say, you need a new direction. You need to rethink the way you're doing business if you want to bring about health equity in this decade. A new, bold direction, and that is what we call the social determinants of health, a term that many of you are familiar with who work in the field, that you may have heard about it, but it's a different look at what health is all about, what communities are all about, and how we, in fact, can improve a lot of our populations. So here's the metaphor that explains what this is all about. It's called upstream, downstream thinking. And I want you to imagine that you're standing on the bank of this river, and there are two people out there and they're fishing, and they're drinking a Bud Light or whatever you drink when you go fishing. I always tell my audiences, I'm from the South Bronx, I know no damn thing about fishing, except how to eat good, fresh fish. That's the worthwhile. So they're standing on the bank of the river drinking a Bud Light, and all of a sudden a baby floats down the river. And they're shocked, needless to say. Before they can do anything, a second baby floats down the river. And the first guy throws his fishing rod down and jumps in the river to save these babies. The second guy throws his fishing rod down, but he turns and starts running upstream. But the first guy calls to the second guy and said, "Yo, dude, where are you going? I need you to help me pull the babies out the river." He said, "No, I'm going upstream to find out who's throwing the babies in the river and stop them." So in the context of our work, the babies in the river represent all the inequities, the focus on advertising in black communities and Latino communities, economic inequities, social justice inequities, housing inequities, all the things that are responsible for poor health in populations around the globe, and particularly the United States. And upstream are the factors that are the causation of the downstream problem. And what it's essentially saying is, we could be, if we spend all of our time, like we've been doing, and many of us, pulling babies out the river, because that's the moral thing to do, it never stops. So we pull out 10 babies out the river, and 5 more are floating downstream. We pull out those 5 and 10 more floating downstream, because we've never gone upstream to find out what's the cause of the cause, and how do we stop that so we don't have babies in the river. That's the social determinants of health, and it is a scary proposition, because these are just some of the things that we have to deal with. It would be wonderful to say that we can do this in a decade. We can find a way to eliminate racism, poverty, and oppression, and just change, kind of level the playing field for all of us. But it's a big job. And if we all went upstream, the other side of the equation, and left nobody downstream, well, you know, we'd lose probably 150,000 people a year in excess death. They die before their time. Those are the babies in the river. So if we all went upstream, and it took us 10 years to eliminate racism, oppression, and lack of opportunity, that's 10 years times 150,000 people who died over the course of those 10 years that should have been saved. So we can't all stay downstream. We can't all go upstream. We have to find a way to split the difference and do both. You know, I don't like military references, but if you have enemies attacking you from both sides and you just face one side, you get swept over from the other end. So you got to find a way to do both. This is an important part of this work. I would encourage you to look at anything around social determinants of health to get a better understanding of all these various forms. But in my analysis, occupation, education, income, which is socioeconomic status, and probably the gap in income, may be the most sensitive indicators of the health of populations. But racism is certainly on this list. And I will tell you, racism is still an issue in the United States. It's still an issue globally. It's an issue that we still have not effectively dealt with. When President Obama gave his famous speech in Philadelphia, I thought this was a wonderful opportunity for us to have this national dialogue, but it didn't happen. And for those of us who think just because we have a black man in the White House, there's no racism in America, you're wrong. You're wrong. It's there in many, many different ways. And I'm going to share a few things with you, but some of the other social determinants that are of importance: housing, political power, the social gradient, stress, a significant factor. So education influences health in many, many, many ways. Most basically, the better your education, the better job you have. The better job you have, the more money you make. The more money you make, the better neighborhood you live in. You know, all these things are cyclic, and they refer to each other, so it's difficult to say which one is most important. But education is also linked to social and psychological factors that affect health, and it's a very important element there's conversations about high school dropouts all over the country. You know, higher rates amongst Latino and black kids, particularly black males. Well, one of the things that we know from research is that a shorter life expectancy is associated with a dropout rate. So it's not just dropping out of an opportunity to finish your education, it's shortening your lifespan if you drop out of high school. So that becomes an important health issue for us to address when it comes to social determinants. Is income an issue? Absolutely. Study done at Harvard University looking at about close to 300 cities in the United States and analyzing death from income inequities, and said it's comparable to combined loss of life from lung cancer, diabetes, motor vehicle crashes, HIV infection, and homicide. So we missed an opportunity to improve the health status of populations by not looking at economic inequities and only looking at specific disease. I think that's one of the things that Einstein would say you need to take a second look at. Is housing a social determinant of health? Here are two photographs of housing. The one on your left, yes, on the far side, is a housing project in Louisville, Kentucky called Carter Homes. Is that a healthy looking environment? Absolutely not. The picture on the other side is the same neighborhood. After an infusion of Hope 6 funds from the federal government, from HUD, designed to eliminate housing projects that are concentrated segregation and concentrated poverty, where there's nothing positive about them, to a place where you have multiple layers of income living in those environments. Some houses are Section 8 supported, some houses are cash on the barrelhead, somebody had paid for a house. So the whole notion of segregation of poverty is eliminated in a Hope 6 project like this. So housing, definitely an issue. Environment, definitely an issue. You could look at environmental stressors. Any place in the country, you'll find the concentration of environmental stresses relates exactly directly to the concentration of African American, Latino, and poor white populations. You don't see rubber plants in middle-income America, but you see them in poor sections of Louisville, Kentucky. And there are examples of that all over the United States. Place matters. I'm sure you probably heard that term. Recent study came out maybe 2 months ago that said the most sensitive indicator of your health is your zip code. Not whether you exercise, not whether you, not even smoking, not whether you smoke, but your zip code. That the neighborhood you live in dramatically affects your health status from many, many different ways. What's available to you, what's not available to you, level of violence, level of opportunities presented to you, level of services presented to you. So it would make sense that one of the things that we would want to do from a standpoint of health of populations is address the issue of neighborhood development, community development. You know, so it's not just a unilateral thing, they're all interrelated with each other. Aristotle himself said thousands of years ago, tell me how a man died and I'll tell you where he lived. What a profound statement from him. So this is a New York City apartment. This is a woman who's trying to take care of her family as best she can. She's in the bathroom filling her pot with water to boil her chicken. And we look at this slide all the time and say, well, what does the kitchen look like if she's got to get water out of the bathroom? And what kind of a healthy environment is this that she's trying to provide for her kids? The woman in the red shirt is doing a downstream process for the New York City Health Department. This kid on the bed has asthma. And lots of us have programs like this where we go around to give mom and dad signs and symptoms of asthma, and when the kid needs to go to the emergency department, this is the point at which you take them. But mom is saying, what's that stuff up in the corner on the ceiling? That's mold and mildew. That's really generating this kid's problem. So an upstream approach as opposed to a downstream approach, an upstream approach would be to require by policy that all landlords have to eliminate mold, mildew, moisture, and roach infestation in their apartments. That would dramatically affect the health and the health of kids who have asthma, cut down on absenteeism, et cetera. Addiction, which you all know a lot about addiction because of the work that you do with tobacco products, but it's a response to social breakdown. And many times it's escapism. Important factor in worsening inequities of health, well, no question about it. But what you may not know, in 1985 there was a task force report on black minority health, the first real concentration of information together in one location. One of the original 6 causes of excess deaths was chemical dependency, which included tobacco use, abuse, and addiction. And we listened to some of the presentations this morning, just wonderful presentations on the addiction process, the fact that nicotine is such an addictive substance, and these are all things that you know very well. The social gradient, I said I would only mention briefly. It just says that if you imagine a vertical scale that everybody sits on, your health status is dependent upon where you are on the grade, on that social gradient. Nothing else. So if you're very high up on the social gradient, your health is better than the person who's in the middle, the person who's on the bottom. and that we say is unfair and unjust. There should be no reason that that determines what your health status and your life expectancy is going to be. Racism. This is a work of a good friend of mine, Kamara Jones from the CDC, and her definition of racism is here on this slide. She talks about structuring opportunity based on how one looks. As you all know, there's no genetic marker for race. The Human Genome Project, there's nothing in the genes that says this person's black, this person's Latino, this person's Asian. There are none. However, based upon the way you look, determines what may happen to you. So I use her 3 levels of individually mediated, institutionalized, and internalized, and say that if I decide that anybody with green hair is a criminal, and everybody I see I treat that way, that's individually mediated. But now I work for the Housing Authority, and I'm charged to draft a policy on housing. And after all, I know that people with green hair are criminals, so I write it in the policy for the housing. So if you approach the housing department, housing authority for an apartment, and you have green hair, forget it, because it's been written down in the policy, and now 2nd generation policy and 3rd generation policy, so it's in there. That's institutionalized. Internalized, which may be the most insidious, when people with green hair decide, yeah, I'm a criminal. Everybody's right. So they behave that way. And it's linked to hopelessness, helplessness, and just a higher rate of disease and early death. So it's a very, very insidious process that's at play here and has been for several generations, and we need to find a way to address that. This is a picture that we're all used to seeing, even being from the Bronx. I've had negative opportunities to see signs for white only as I tried to go into a Howard Johnson's in Virginia. Just blew me away as a 16-year-old kid. But this one is Native American related. This is the Trail of Tears represented in this painting. That's the forced march of thousands of people who happen to be Native American from the East Coast to Oklahoma Territory, and the thousands who died on the way. Generational trauma, multi-generational trauma is an important element of this ongoing racism. And again, this is something else that you know very well. Tobacco is a direct impact on leading health indicators, cancers, cardiovascular, respiratory. I left out stroke on this slide, but you know this material very well. And all of them are dramatic inequities when you compare the rates. So I was listening to the presentations of the youth. Denise and I were sitting in the back. And this question of targeting production and marketing is something that we've all talked about a lot. And she mentioned Uptown cigarettes, and Marlboro Lights was one that was a local issue in Louisville, Kentucky. We tried to organize to prevent yet another product coming out that was focused on the African American community by virtue of the levels of menthol in the product. And the convenience stores and product placement and advertising. I like your slides. I like your slides much better than mine when it comes to this, so we have to negotiate. But this is one I pulled out from a campaign that was done clearly focusing on a particular population. This happens to be focusing on the African population. This is an East African proverb that they put on this slide. And you can see how beautiful she looks and the material on her head, so beautiful color. The slogan for Virginia Slims at this time was "Find Your Voice." Now, how ironic is that a product that can cause throat cancer as a part of this demonstration of targeted marketing? If you look in the middle of this slide, you can see menthol. I think that's Winston. I'm not sure which one that is. I can't see from here. But the process of banning cigarette advertising from billboards was accomplished quite some time ago. But this size of target advertisement is all over communities of color and poor communities all over the United States. It's still there. And they literally, as was mentioned in early presentation, your presentation, plastered at levels designed to attract youth. And you will not find that in middle class America. It suggests that there's an element of minimally not caring, maximally targeting because of race, ethnicity, or socioeconomic status, which of course is injustice. That's a social injustice. This is a quote from the Surgeon General's report, I think in 2006, I believe. A major conclusion of the Surgeon General report on tobacco is that African Americans bear the greatest health burden related to smoking of any racial and ethnic minority group in the United States. In and of itself, that would make you wonder what's going on. Strongly encourage you to take a look at this documentary. This is called Unnatural Causes. It was a PBS documentary circulated a few years back. It's still very, very relevant. If you've not seen it, I would encourage you to get a hold of it. The medical school may have a copy. The School of Public Health may have a copy. Some of the libraries may have a copy, but it really highlights and explains this issue of social determinants and how it impacts on the health of the population. Actually, one of the segments is called Place Matters. There's also a segment on diabetes and infant mortality rates. So remember, no man is an island. This is John Donne. No man is an island unto himself. Ask not for whom the bell tolls, it tolls for thee. So to the extent that we don't do for others, we are injuring ourselves. We're all connected, as I mentioned a bit earlier. Health in all policies is a relatively new, to us anyway, process, recognizing that public health does not run the world. I wish we did. It'd be a healthier place, but we don't. So the agencies and elements of communities that we have to interrelate with, like transportation, housing, education, all need to focus on their policies as they relate to health. And we need to sit down around a table together like they're supposed to be doing in Washington, D.C., the Prevention Council, and putting issues on the table from the perspective of your particular expertise. So if you're the housing person, what are the policies relating to health from a housing standpoint? If you're the transportation person, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Only to mention that all of us have done such great work in terms of tobacco prevention and creating smokeless cities and smokeless states and smokeless countries. I mean, Ireland is a smokeless country. It's amazing to me. Several years ago, you have to walk into a restaurant and fight your way through the smoke, or a bar. And matter of fact, how many remember sitting on a plane that had a smoking section and a non-smoking section? It was just a piece of cardboard sitting on the seat. So from this seat back is non-smoking. From this seat forward is smoking. Like somehow you're not going to get affected by the secondhand smoke. But we were successful in organizing with multiple coalitions and partners, just like you are doing here, to create one of the strongest ordinances in the United States, in that we have 23,000 businesses in Louisville, Kentucky. Only one allows smoking, and that one is a R&D process, a firm that does R&D for the tobacco industry. That includes Churchill Downs. No smoking in Churchill Downs if you're on the outside. So that's what we used to see, and that's what we see now. And we want to see all over the country. By the way, congratulations to the state on being a smoke-free state, except for the exceptions. We had to fight that same battle in Louisville with all kind of stupid stuff like, well, if you sell 30% of your income is your revenue is on selling food, you're not really a bar, so therefore, back and forth, and just ban them all. That's the way. That's the way to do it. Partners are important in this business. Non-traditional partners, what we found to be very valuable, like YMCA and others around food deserts, around smoking cessation issues, et cetera. And working our way up to a strong social movement, I think is the answer. I think empowering individuals, organizing groups, bringing people together around the elements of social justice, health equity, and the right to health is the movement that we need. That's the next movement that we need to see. Those of us who do this work, and we're in health and public health, et cetera, we don't seem to get very excited. We get excited amongst ourselves, but we don't seem to raise our voices to Congress and to the senators and to the local legislators and to the mayor around issues that we feel are important. We don't come out in large numbers and demonstrate for our own benefit and for the benefit of the country. It's one of the things I wish we could find a way to get over, to be more energetic and more advocacy oriented, to make the difference that we like to make in the world. I just put this in because some of us are APHA members. This is my objectives for the year: creating health equity, assuring the right to health and health care, and rebuilding public health capacity and workforce. By the way, I certainly would encourage you all to find an opportunity to come to Boston for APHA as its president this year in Boston on November the 2nd to the 6th. We'd love to see you all come to Boston. It's going to be colder than it is down here. But someone told me it snowed in Arkansas. Is that right? All right. It's not snowing in Florida. That's what we're looking at. So my hope is that you've gained something new in terms of knowledge, that you use the knowledge, that you found some relevancy in what you do as it relates to this work. Certainly that the luncheon has been worth your time. Perhaps you have a new perspective. This next piece is important. Any conversation around health equity, social justice, etc., means that the national discussion around justice and human rights has been elevated to another level. And I think that's a good thing. So where do we go from here? You guys have goals and objectives to eliminate the exemptions, to create a truly smoke-free state. I think looking at this from a standpoint of a social justice model and a human rights model is beneficial to the work that you're trying to do here in the state. Also recognize that this is a risky business. People have lost their jobs. People have lost their livelihood. You know how risky it is, and you're taking the risk. And I think you're just a perfect example for any audience of somebody who's taken the risk and has done fine. And it feels good about what they are, what the work that they're doing, and there's no confusion about the fact that they've taken a risk, and we all need to do the same thing. So I'm going to ask you to take a risk with me for a second, and take a deep breath and close your eyes. Take a deep breath and close your eyes, because I want to share something with you about risk. To laugh is to risk appearing a fool. To weep is to risk appearing sentimental. To reach out for another is to risk involvement. To expose your feelings is to risk exposing your true self. To place your ideas, your dreams before the crowd is to risk their loss. To love is to risk not being loved in return. To live is to risk dying. To hope is to risk despair. To try is to risk failure, but risks must be taken, because the greatest hazard in life is to risk nothing. The person who risks nothing, does nothing, has nothing, and is nothing. He may avoid suffering and sorrow, but he can't simply learn to feel, change, grow, love, or live. Chained by his certitude, he is a slave. He has forfeited freedom. For only a person who risks is free. So I'd invite you to keep that thought, open your eyes, introduce you to my life's partner and business partner, right there, Denise, and leave you with the 24th century philosopher, Mr. Spock, who said, the good of the many outweigh the good of the few or the one. So I leave you with live long and prosper.
Dr. Trautman, we would not let you come to Arkansas and not leave without giving you your award. And this simply states, this is the Arkansas Traveler Award, awarded to Dr. Adewale Trautman, and I hope I said that correctly, as an Arkansas traveler who is hereby authorized and commissioned to serve as an ambassador of goodwill from Arkansas to the people of other states, the people of nations beyond the borders of the United States, or wherever this ambassador of Arkansas may hereafter travel or reside. It is signed by the Secretary of State, Mark Martin, and our current governor, Mike Beebe.
Thank you so much.
Each year we present an award to one of our subgrantees who has done outstanding work over the last fiscal year. And this year, I'd like to present the Outstanding 2013 Subgrantee of the Year to the Arkansas Human Development Corporation. If you've never met Sue, her spunkiness is contagious.
I couldn't say it.
Okay. All right, we hope you've had an enjoyable day. We'd like to thank you all for coming. At this time, I would like our planning committee to stand. The planning committee. Catherine. I'd like to extend a very special thank you to the planning committee. Also to UAPB TV. They were the ones who put together the video you saw this morning, and in most of your package you should have a copy of that DVD that was shown this morning. That's the Clearing the Air Conference and Review. Also for videotaping our event today. Also to the UAPB Learning Resource Center and Mr. Richard Reedus. To Advantage Communications Incorporated. Our volunteers, particularly, you may not have seen them here today because they were on the youth side. The Tau Sigma chapter of Omega Psi Phi. The Delta Omega Omega chapter of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. The National Panhellenic Council at the University of Arkansas at Pine Bluff. They were the ones who came out early one Saturday morning to teach the youth the steps. So we really wanted to thank them for taking the time out of their weekend to help our youth. To our speakers, thank you. And to our participants on the program, and to those of you who are in attendance, we wish you well. Thank you. This concludes the conference.
Thank you.